Hi, Duox. I hope you're having a great day. I am going to finish up our section on vitamins and minerals. So today we'll be talking about the minerals section. So I'm going to share my screen with you here. Hold tight. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so again, there's maybe one slide that's different in my version than compared to yours. So, and I'll point that out when we get to it. But again, when we think about minerals, we're thinking about kind of that other subcategory of the micronutrients. And I would emphasize with the micronutrients, it's not that they're not as important as the macronutrients, we just need them in smaller quantities. So let's take a look at some of the minerals and kind of some of their functions as well. So again, as an overview, minerals are going to play a role in many processes. So their role within the body can vary substantially. So I don't really have like a blanketed statement for, what are the jobs of minerals, because they're so diverse in regards to what each mineral might do. So some minerals will serve as cofactors and enable enzyme functions to occur. So a cofactor, think of a cofactor as kind of like a helper to cause a reaction to occur. So when I have a cofactor present, it can speed up the rate of a reaction. So again, when we think about how this relates to enzymes, it could be related to digestion or metabolism, something along those lines. So again, some minerals will serve in that role. Some will contribute to body compounds. For example, when we think about body compounds, iron is an important mineral for us there. Iron serves as kind of the basis of the red blood cells, which allows us to carry oxygen in the blood. So that's an important component of the blood and of our cardiorespiratory systems. And then also, minerals can assist us with body growth and development. So when we think about the role of calcium and phosphorus, let me get my pointer here. I like to use this little thing. So growth and development, again, calcium and phosphorus are important for this. Again, phosphorus serves as kind of the hard substance that we have within like the bones. Okay, so it's what allows the bones, or one of the components that allows the bones to have its kind of tensile strength. And then also calcium plays a role in development of that bone strength as well. So when we think about growth, again, it's kind of weird to think about this, and this is true even as adults, but your bones are actually fairly dynamic in nature. So that means that they're constantly being remodeled and modified. So it's important that we are consuming and we have a good amount of calcium and phosphorus in order to support that constant dynamic growth or change, not necessarily growth, change within the bones themselves. When we think about development, again, as kids, how do we grow taller? It's certainly related to, the availability of calcium and phosphorus and their role as it relates to, bone growth, from a longitudinal standpoint as well. So those two minerals are super important when we think about those concepts. This is the slide you don't have, so do make sure you're writing down notes on this particular slide, because this one, for some reason, wasn't on the student version from what I remember. So how do we get rid of minerals? How are they excreted or lost from the body? We can lose them in three ways. So we can lose them in our sweat, we can lose them in urine, or we can lose them in feces. Okay, so again, sweat, urine, feces is how we're getting rid of minerals. And again, that's not necessarily that we like desire to get rid of them. We have, depending on the mineral, we have like a limited capacity to store them. So that's one reason why it is important for us to make sure we're consuming the appropriate quantities of these each day, is because we're not able to store some of them or store much for some of them. And so we are excreting, the excess in some scenarios. So another concept that I think is super interesting when we think about minerals is something known as the bioavailability. And this is a really intriguing topic to me. So when we think about the minerals and really any nutrient, for example, another thing that's important for us to understand is not only like what is consumed or what is contained in that product, but also how much am I able to actually absorb and utilize. And that's what the bioavailability tells us. So what's the percentage of that particular nutrient that I can digest, absorb, and be ready to utilize within the body. Okay. So it turns out even though we have minerals present in foods, they're not always bioavailable unless the body can absorb them. So this absorptive process, so the ability for us to move those minerals from the digestive tract into the blood stream is super important, and it's not always a given, right? It's not like 100% of the time I consume this particular item and then I'm able to use that item. So the bioavailability can vary from nutrient to nutrient. Okay. So what are some factors that affect the bioavailability of a mineral? It's certainly affected by what form we're consuming them in. Okay. So it turns out that animal products have the greatest bioavailability of any nutrients that we can consume. Okay, so it's easiest for us to break down those molecules and be able to, then also transport minerals, for example, from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. Okay. So their bioavailability is greater than plant products, for example. And the reason that plant products aren't as quite as good as animal products as it relates to bioavailability is because of fiber. And so fiber can hinder the absorption of some of those minerals because again, fiber serves as kind of this bulky substance that's not digested and it's going to kind of just pass through our system. So sometimes the minerals kind of get caught in that fiber, basically, think of it that way, and then so therefore they like pass through the system. um, so that can be problematic. So if I am vegetarian, for example, I might need to consume more minerals than somebody who is a meat eater for those reasons, because I'm not absorbing quite as many. That's not to say plant products are not good, right? Don't misconstrue that by any means. Fiber is good for a variety of other reasons. But if we're consuming foods that are high in fiber, just know that the mineral bioavailability might not be as great in those particular substances. Okay. So again, I'm going to kind of go through some of the, not every single mineral, but we'll hit kind of some of those major minerals and kind of look at the specifics of each of those. So sodium, its, I guess, abbreviation is Na, and it's actually Na plus, so there should be a little plus here as well because it's a positively charged molecule. What is its function? Sodium is important for a lot of different things, actually. It helps with the transmission of our nerve impulses. So it allows us to send signals within the nervous system. If we didn't have sodium, we wouldn't be able to stimulate the nervous system, communicate within the body. Also assists in water balance. So again, if you've ever eaten, like my favorite, and my son who's like he's almost 3 years old, freaking loves salt and vinegar chips, which I think is a super weird thing for like a 2-year-old to like, but I love them and he loves them too. But again, when you eat those salty things, what do you want when you're eating that? You want something to wash it down, right? Whether that's water or pop or whatever it is, that you're craving at that particular time. We crave some sort of fluid, and the reason for that is sodium tends to also pull water with it. Okay, so again, the more water that, or I'm sorry, the more sodium that I consume, we're also increasing the likelihood that we will absorb or retain water. Think of it that way. So again, salt tends to pull water along with it, and so therefore, if we can determine or like depict where we want to move salt, we're also going to then control where water goes as well, because water will follow wherever that salt is. The bioavailability of sodium is nearly 100%. Okay, so again, we're very good at being able to absorb and have sodium readily available. So it's probably the easiest nutrient for us to absorb. And turns out that we very commonly overconsume it as well. So consuming too much sodium could result in hypertension, which is high blood pressure. And so I want to kind of explain the relationship between those factors. So if I consume a lot of sodium or a lot of salt, I'm also going to retain a lot of water. Okay? If I have a lot of water within my body, I might have a lot of fluid inside of my blood. Okay, and so if I increase the amount of fluid that I have in my blood vessels, that can lead to high blood pressure. Okay, so that's what hypertension is high blood pressure. So again, that's kind of the relationship between sodium and blood pressure. If I had deficiency in sodium, this could lead to muscle cramping, dehydration. Not very common for us to see deficiencies in sodium. There is a condition known as hyponatremia. Hypo means below, natremia is what we're talking about when we look at sodium. So it's basically like sodium balance. You have low sodium balance. So hyponatremia is common in certain types of athletes that are just drinking water, like in a hot environment, for example, but they're not like consuming anything with salt, because again, remember, salt and water have to maintain this type of balance. So if I'm not consuming, you know, any salt at all and just water, that can cause this imbalance within my body and cause this condition known as hyponatremia. What else do I want to tell you? So this is uncommon in sedentary people, but may be a major risk for athletes. Under what conditions should we, you know, be concerned about hyponatremia? If it's hot out, so again, I'm losing a lot of fluids and I'm just drinking plain water in high quantities. Okay, so any athlete, when you're out in a hot environment, and you're sweating a lot and you're losing a lot of fluid, it's important that we are making sure we're replacing some of those electrolytes as well, because when we sweat, we're losing some of that sodium in addition to the fluid. If I'm just putting fluid back in and not consuming any types of salts, that can be problematic for us in that you know, scenario. How common is hyponatremia? Not common at all. Again, of all the coaching and athletic events that I've, you know, been involved in, you know, that way, I don't think I've ever seen anyone with hyponatremia. However, you know, we have seen a lot of people suffer from dehydration. So, you know, I guess key takeaway when we think about this and this kind of this risk for this, it's good to make sure we're consuming something that includes electrolytes. So something like Gatorade, or even just you know, like a vitamin water will often have some salts with it. And again, you can get, you know, the calorie-free version of Gatorade or whatever, and that'll have plenty of salt in it as well. So again, making sure we're consuming those things and not just plain water if it's super hot and we're losing a lot of sweat is important. Okay. Potassium is kind of our other major player when we think about nerve impulse transmission. So again, sodium and potassium are going to play a really important role in allowing our nervous system to be excitable. So we have to have this kind of appropriate level in a variety of locations in order for nerves to be able to send a signal. Can also assist with water balance as well. A lot of similarities when we think about potassium as it relates to what we just talked about with sodium as well. So high levels of potassium could be associated with hypertension if they're combined with those high levels of sodium that we talked about in the previous slide. There's no major risk for deficiencies if I had if I had a potassium deficiency, but it may contribute to muscle cramping in athletes. So anybody ever like wake up in the middle of the night with like a Charlie horse, or like that throbbing pain or like contraction in your calf, for example? Or like sometimes when I'm swimming, if I do, like I'll wear like flippers, which kind of helps to like activate your hips and different things like that. You can use them for different drills, but they're like a little bit weighted. And so when I point my toes down and in those flippers, sometimes I'll get kind of this muscle cramping in my foot as well. Again, a lot of times that's related to dehydration, but maybe you've heard before, if you get those cramps, that you should, eat a banana, for example, and bananas are going to be high in potassium. So that was one thing that, like, my dad always told me growing up. He was like a basketball coach, so like those were that was something that he would always tell us at like tournaments and things like that, is, oh, make sure you're having some bananas so that you don't get any cramps and things like that. So again, it doesn't have to be bananas, but we do think that there is some sort of relationship between having a deficiency in potassium and potentially having muscle cramping going on. Again, here's some other examples of foods that are high in potassium. Sorry, my picture's a little bit blurry here, but limes, kiwi, here you can see strawberries, peppers, cauliflower, eggplant, certainly bananas is another big one. Citrus items, so here you can see like orange juice over here, looks like cantaloupe in here. And raisins as well. I see some dark leafy greens in this category. So again, kind of a good variety of different items that you could consume to make sure you're getting enough calcium and potassium. This is potassium. Sorry. Calcium's our next mineral that we'll be talking about. Calcium is important for bone structure, tooth strength, and also muscle contractions. So that's something that's important. I think that the dairy industry does a really nice job of pushing the importance of consuming dairy as it relates to, getting enough calcium. However, you can also get calcium in some other ways as well. Those dark leafy greens made the cut. Sardines, again, I don't know if anyone ever really actually eats those. Salmon, maybe you eat occasionally. But again, those are some other options for us in regards to getting calcium. So this is a common mineral that is that we have low levels in. So it's common for people to have deficiencies in calcium. So 75% of females are not meeting the recommendations for calcium intake. And we think about athletes, female athletes are most likely to be affected, including, dancers, gymnasts, endurance competitors, maybe people that are concerned with their physique or concerned with, body weight, body image, body size, those types of athletes are at a greater risk to not have enough calcium simply because they're not consuming enough calories, most likely. So again, that's a common concern for females. Again, what's the risk associated with not consuming enough calcium? Bone mineral density, basically. So again, for like endurance athletes, that can come up as stress fractures, for example. So it puts us at a greater risk for developing stress fractures and potentially some other overuse injuries. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Let's see. So again, interesting, both exercise and calcium supplementation can help to prevent low bone density. And I'll kind of talk about why that is. So again, calcium is going to help us to create strong bones. Okay. But exercise actually causes us to put tension on the bones. So again, I wish I could draw a picture for you right now. I wonder if I can. Let's see. Yeah, let's try this. Okay. I'm not great at drawing. I wish I had a touch screen. So imagine this is my bone. I know, I'm a very good artist, right? And in order for movement to occur, I have to have a tendon attach. Okay, so this is the tendon and this is the muscle up here. So in order for movement to occur, the contraction of the muscle causes a pull on the bone here against the tendon, and that's what allows us to have movement occurring. Okay, so how is exercise related to bone density? Okay, every time I contract this muscle, it pulls on this bone. And as I pull on this bone more frequently or with greater force, that's going to stimulate this bone to grow. Okay? So again, remember that bones are dynamic in nature. They're not just like, oh, I got a bone and now it's just the way it is. Like it's actually constantly changing, which is pretty cool. So that's one thing that can happen. So again, the more I stimulate this, so like with endurance exercise, if I'm doing weight bearing activities, that's going to stimulate the bone because I'm repetitively pulling against the surface. If I'm strength training, maybe I'm not doing it as often, meaning that the repetitions aren't as great as how many contractions you would have with endurance exercise. However, you're going to ask this muscle to produce a lot more force. So the pull is significantly like harder, think of it that way. And so that would also stimulate more bone growth. Okay. So again, both of those factors help us to prevent low bone density. Muscle cramps could be partly due to calcium loss. So again, if you're suffering from a lot of cramps or that's a common issue for you, maybe we need to look at how much calcium we're consuming and making sure we're getting enough calcium. There's actually been very little research on the performance enhancing effects of calcium supplementation. Again, is that going to make you a better athlete? I don't think so, but it can help us to stay injury free, which in turn would allow you to be a better athlete by default because you're able to compete versus somebody who's on the bench because they have this injury. So again, we find that calcium supplementation can only help when we have calcium depletion. So again, if you are deficient in calcium, this might be a helpful route for you. And its impact on the bone seems to be the most important impact that we have. Our next big nutrient to talk about is iron. Again, it's chemical like abbreviation. You don't need to know these. I'm just like a nerd and I like the chemistry part of it, is Fe. And again, as we already mentioned, iron is a really important component of hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is going to allow us to carry oxygen in the blood. Iron also plays an important role in our immune function. Places that we can get iron. So here are some examples down here. Really any type of meat product. So again, you can see chicken, turkey, eggs, cereal, or I'm sorry, and also cereal will contain some iron as well. We can find iron in some vegetable products, such as dark leafy greens. That's not in this particular picture, but like spinach, for example, broccoli, are two that contain a fair amount of iron as well. So if I'm deficient in iron, again, this is a fairly common, I guess, issue to have. This is known as anemia, and anemia is going to be common in vegetarians. It's also going to be common in female athletes. So those are things that we want to keep in mind. However, research isn't showing that everyone needs to supplement with an iron supplement. So again, that's not necessary. It's certainly not going to hurt. There's no, major risks or risk factors associated with iron supplementation or anything like that. But again, why is this more pertinent in females than males? It turns out that we have some ability to store iron. So the average man can store 1,000 milligrams of iron within the body, but the average female can only store 300 milligrams. Okay, so again, that makes it more difficult, or it makes it easier, I should say, for females to be deficient in iron because we simply, aren't able to store as much as maybe what some of the men are able to store. The other thing to think about is the bioavailability of iron that we find in different products. So one reason why taking an iron supplement isn't necessarily warranted is because the bioavailability of iron is probably the lowest of any of the nutrients that we have. So bioavailability of an iron supplement is only like 10%, which is crazy. So again, if you do take a vitamin now, like a multivitamin, I encourage you to kind of look at the back of it, and check out the label on there, and notice that it'll give you like 200% or whatever of your daily value. And the reason for that is because we're only absorbing about 10%. Okay, so if it gives you 200% of your daily value, you're really only absorbing and utilizing about 20% of your daily value. So again, we've still got to make sure we're consuming enough iron in our normal diet with regular food as well. So again, supplemental bioavailability for iron is about 10%. We can absorb more if we are iron deficient. So if I'm iron deficient and I am taking that supplement, your body kind of like compensates for that. And so therefore it will consume, or it will absorb a little bit more. So maybe more like 15 to 20% bioavailability if you are iron deficient. And then if we look at different food sources, again, the bioavailability of iron from food sources is around 35-ish% when it comes from a plant product, and closer to like 55% when you get it from a animal product, which is why, red meat is probably your best bet when looking at, increasing that iron consumption. Eating some sort of red meat. Again, that's tricky because, red meat's going to be high in iron, but also a lot of times high in saturated fats, which is not great. So it's, again, trying to kind of figure out the balance between those two things. Phosphorus is required for bone and tooth strength. It helps with something known as acid-base balance. So within the blood, we have this kind of balance of acidic molecules and basic molecules. And so having the appropriate amount of phosphorus can help us to keep those molecules like balanced out, basically. Think of it that way. Foods that are containing a lot of phosphorus include dairy products, soda actually. And again, I'm not condoning that, we drink a ton of soda or anything. It's just kind of interesting that that's one of the components within soda. Also fish and different types of nuts. So you can see cashews and walnuts and almonds up here as well. So, those are some common sources for phosphorus. This is interesting. I really like this. So this is known as the Andes scale, or the aggregate nutrient density index. And so basically what this scale is, I think it's super cool and interesting. It basically like ranks foods based on a couple things. So it looks at the amount of vitamins and minerals that they're providing in comparison to the amount of calories that they're providing. So again, a high number is good. A high number tells us that it's chock full of vitamins and minerals, but doesn't give us a whole lot of calories. Okay, so notice that, a lot of these on this top side here are dark leafy greens. So you've got kale, collards, bok choy, spinach, Brussels sprouts, arugula, broccoli. So those are all dark leafy greens. Again, cabbage and romaine, I would say, are lighter green foods as well. Then you get down here and we can see quite a few different fruits as well. So again, nothing that I'm going to ask you specifically like, okay, what's the Andes score of a banana? I'm not going to ask you anything like that, but do understand what this concept is. So understand what the aggregate nutrient density index means. So again, basically it's just looking at your, the amount of vitamins and minerals that particular food provides in comparison to the calorie content of that food. So it ranks them, and the higher the number, the better the ranking or the healthier that particular food is for you. So again, I just think that's kind of something interesting. It's kind of a cool thing to kind of rank foods that way. So again, I'm not like a salesperson for eggs or anything like that, but as college students, I understand that, a lot of you and live in apartments and things like that and cook for yourself. This just shows you. Sorry, you can hear my dog in the background. He's wants to go outside, but we're gonna finish this up first, so you're gonna have to bear with him. Um, Again, look at all the different vitamins and minerals provided in 2 servings of eggs. Super cheap, um, in regards to getting a good protein source, but also pretty high in a variety of different vitamins and minerals. So that's a nice cheap option for you if you're looking for some kind of nutrient dense foods. Again, here's just another look at that Andes scale. So look at all the dark green things. If you can take anything out of this, particular unit, I hope it's that you'll try and get 1 dark leafy green a day. So again, try broccoli, try, your asparagus, try spinach, try one of these things each day. Try to incorporate a little bit of that each day. Spinach is an easy one. I like to use spinach. I like to cook with it. So like I'll put it, you can put a little bit of spinach in with your scrambled eggs or something. And you don't really taste it much, especially if like you like ketchup, or I like to put like hot sauce on my eggs. So it kind of, like masks the flavor if you're not huge on the flavor of spinach. I'll also do pasta. So, I'll throw some spinach in with my pasta, and once it's cooked down, again, if you've got marinara sauce on that, so I'll do like, spinach and then maybe a little bit of broccoli in there with, your meat and marinara sauce and pasta. And again, you don't really taste the spinach too much, but you're just mixing that in and kind of getting those extra nutrients out of that. So that's another nice way you can kind of add it in. So again, I like to cook it with different things, and that would be a good option for you there to kind of think about. So again, when we think about, the role of minerals as it relates to athletics and our athletes, despite the important roles minerals play in the body, typically if we are eating well, we can meet these requirements with the typical American diet. So again, make sure you're eating variety, make sure you're kind of hitting 1 or 2 of those dark leafy greens, make sure you're getting enough fruits and vegetables, and we should be meeting those requirements each day. So it doesn't seem that mineral supplementation above and beyond kind of those recommendations isn't necessarily recommended. So it doesn't, like, you can't just take a mineral or a vitamin supplement and think like, oh, well, I had more vitamin C today, and so now I'm going to be healthier, or I'm going to, be a better athlete or anything like that. So it doesn't seem to have an ergogenic effect on athletic performance. So basically what that means is it's not like improving our performance. It's not aiding your performance in any way. Now, certainly it can make up for some deficits that you have. So again, if you didn't consume like enough calcium, for example, it can help to make up for that, but it's certainly not going to like put you ahead of somebody who like is just consuming like the normal amount. So should you take a vitamin and mineral supplement? Kind of up to you. I'm not a huge proponent of taking those products. I would rather try and get those items from food sources and eating, a nice variety of different foods and things like that. I'd rather save my money, and just try and get that from some natural sources, just simply because the bioavailability is greater. And I like to eat spinach, and I like to eat some of those, foods that were higher on the Andes scale. Um, does that mean a mineral or vitamin supplement is bad for you? No, it's certainly not going to cause you any harm. So we don't see any adverse effects. But again, if we're thinking about the price point associated with, consuming a vitamin or mineral supplement, that's something to kind of think about. Could you just eat healthy and get what you need that way? Yeah, we do think that you could do that. So again, something to think about, in regards to whether or not you use a vitamin or mineral supplement. I know earlier in the semester I asked if people were taking them. There was quite a few people in our class that are taking some sort of supplement, and so not a bad thing. It's certainly going to help you to make sure that you're getting everything that you need in. But if you're eating healthy, in the first place, maybe you don't need to, if that makes sense. Okay, so I think that's it for our minerals section. I hope you have a great day, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions on any of this.